You're inside the Mom Stuff Coffee Shop, a podcast dedicated to helping you get back up again, turning your pain into power, turning your trauma into triumph. I am your host, KK Smith, and I find joy in helping you get back up again. This podcast holds a space for you to grow, heal, and connect like you never have before. So grab your coffee and step inside the Mom Stuff Coffee Shop. Welcome to the show. Friends, today I have an exciting show for you. We are joined with Jesi Carroll. She is a life design coach. So welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So as you mentioned, I'm Jesi, the life design coach. And so essentially what I do is I help people really unravel their subconscious or help them really dig deep within themselves by utilizing design and decorating in our environment as a reflection into who we are. You know, I help people understand that their external environments are really just representations of what's going on internally, since everything we do, everything about the way we keep our home is typically very habitual. So I just help people dig deep in that way. So creating a beautiful home and a beautiful life that they love.
So can you give our listeners a background that you have in design? And I also wanted you to talk a little bit about the subconscious. But first, can you give us the background that you have in design? I think they would find that's really interesting how you correlated all of your life design together.
Yeah, so my experience is very non-traditional, and I think that's why I approach it in the way that I do, kind of that fresh perspective that's different from, the typical trends and all the things that you might see in the media and on HGTV. I am certified. I got certified in home staging first and then interior design through the New York Institute of Art and Design. But for pretty much my entire life, I've been decorating, reorganizing my own personal space to make it just feel good and to work within the resources that I personally had, which meant that I wasn't able to go, and spend buku dollars to create an awesome sanctuary. It meant having to get really creative. It meant having to, reorganize my space in a new way to feel that refresh that people are seeking. And I saw that really changing my own life and creating such a good vibe and feel. I could really feel the effects of what I was creating, but I was just doing that for me. And I honestly was doing that since I was about 7 years old because I was blessed to have a mom who encouraged that creativity. She said, "What theme do you want your room to be?" And then would let me create it. And I did that, pretty much my whole life. And so when I, left and went to college, I kept doing it. And pretty soon enough people, say, "Oh, how did you do that? Can you help me?" That it gets your wires kind of turning and churning and wondering, could you do something with that? And that's eventually what I did. But, I was definitely not doing this professionally up until now. I was, in the corporate world, kind of doing a whole different life. So now this feels like it's me, birthing who I was meant to be this whole time and getting to help people, feel that same energy that I've been feeling my whole life and creating rooms. So it's super fun and just, a different style, I would say, than people typically see.
That is awesome how your work is actually connected to your background. So you mentioned the subconscious. I wanted you to explain to our guests, what is the conscious mind and what is the subconscious mind?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So the subconscious mind, it's active, it's always active, but it's the part that we're not even tuning into half the time. It's the part of us that is actually leading our life and we don't even know it. So what's happening is our conscious mind is the one that is more ego-based. It's more the one that's telling us, it's trying to protect us. Whereas our subconscious mind is all the stuff going on in the background that, like I said, that we're not even aware of. So what happens is in the work that I'm doing is helping people really just start to put a pause to the conscious mind, the mind that sits in the front, and trying to silence that a bit and do the inner work to peel back the layers to be able to hear the background mind, the subconscious mind, stronger and better, and hear those intuitive hits, because it can lead you down a really powerful path. But the thing we have to know is that we can control what it says to us, but oftentimes we're allowing it to lead us without even being aware of it. Kind of a jumbled explanation here, but essentially it's the part of us that has so much control, but yet we tune into it the least.
Which one is the one that lies in the seat of our soul? So there are things in my experience that the world wants us to have, and then there are things within us that our soul is trying to wake us up to say, you want this. This is who you really are. So which one of those is our soul, and which one of those is our external social pull? Is it the conscious mind or the subconscious mind?
Oh, that's a deep question. And, it's interesting because I almost want to say that our subconscious and our conscious mind are equally part of the soul. Like the soul is all of it, because I don't believe that there's really a separation. The goal is to align everything. I think it's just representing different parts of our soul. So the conscious mind, and this is really some of the first time I'm really putting like deep words into this, because I think it's like an ingrained knowing that we have. And so we don't always stop to think, okay, what is the difference between the two? But I really think that the conscious mind it's like we think that's what the soul wants us to have, but really the background is really what's going on. It's the internal deep dive that our soul wants us to have. I feel like they're both part of the soul mission, but they're just saying different things. So we have to understand that there are two voices coming through on that soul mission. I would say the one that it's most important to tap into is that subconscious, because that's a deeper understanding of who we truly are. And it's that deeper knowing of what's possible for us in our lives.
And I think so many times we're running on automatic from a social perspective. Like, what should I be doing now in my life? What should I be buying? How do I fit in? How do I show up on social media? But I think those are things that are so external. And if we live our entire lives like that, we'll never know what our soul has been saying all the time. Because I think it's always speaking, but everything else is so loud. So how do you help your clients get to self-love? So we're going to talk about, this podcast is all about self-love, having a relationship with yourself. So can you identify what is self-love? And I know that seems very basic and general, but in your terms of being a life design coach, what does love mean?
You asked such good questions. Love, every word has its own meaning, and we all, depending on the meaning we give it, is what it is to all of us. So everything's different to everybody. It's just a word until it's defined. But in the way that I define love, it's really the true connection to the self, and being so unapologetic in the understanding of who we are, that we allow that to be our compass for how we navigate. And so it's the only thing that matters. Because if you really think about it, and there's a reason I only have 3 pillars that I work on with my clients, is because there's only really 3 key things that really matter in this world. And it's self-love, it's mindset, and then it's co-creating and understanding how to bring that knowing into the world. But love, I really believe self-love, everything comes back to that, because it all comes down to the worthiness that we feel to be who we are in this world. So, and if we're constantly questioning that, then our self-worth is constantly at stake. We're constantly not living authentically because we're allowing everything else to come in. We allow everybody else's input to mean more than our own. And it starts to really weigh us down, and it starts to really affect us and makes us question the truth that we know deep inside, which is that, again, that subconscious that we talked about. So the way that I really help my clients unravel it is I really try to make it simple. These are really complex conversations. These are really deep, philosophical concepts here. But at the end of the day, the goal is how can we apply this stuff now with where we're at right now, today? So I start all of my clients by talking about the idea of grace and giving ourselves kindness and understanding that everything has a gestation period. So it takes a moment from the time we decide something to actually, creating that as our true knowing. So I start everyone by saying, okay, first I want you to forgive yourself. I want you to forgive yourself for everything that you said up to this point, or everything that you've felt, or every time you've should all over yourself. I want people to start with that forgiveness and then decide that moving forward, they know they're not going to be perfect. They might forget some of the tools. They might not create their rituals right away, perfectly, I say with air quotes, perfectly right away, but giving yourself that grace to know that you're working on it. And when you can start building that connection of kindness to the self and actually meeting yourself where you're at and saying, okay, I am not perfect in this, this, and this, or I wish I was better in this. That's okay. You start to create the foundation that can change your life. And so that's where I start with all of my clients, is that foundational kindness, understanding, not taking down the standards of where we think we're supposed to be. We keep raising that bar unknowingly. Again, that subconscious work. We don't even realize we keep raising the bar on ourselves. We can't reach it.
Yeah.
We can't reach it.
And that is so important. It's so true, because I can remember spending so many years in unworthiness and thinking small. And I had a revelation, and I was talking to one of my friends about it before the interview, about how we stay in familiar environments sometimes. And sometimes those environments are not healthy for us, whether they're friendships, whether they're groups, whether they're events that we attend with the same people, and we're not getting nourished. And when I looked at some of my projects that I wanted to do for my life, I said, I should be here, I should be there. But you're so right. We have to first forgive ourselves and say, okay, let's just take away all of that. You're here now. You're starting from here. Maybe you think you should be there, but it's okay, because first you have to start with self-love and worthiness and forgiveness, and really loving yourself like you would love that special loved one. You have to really love yourself to get to that point, to be able to create anything worthy in your life. So I think that is so, so important.
Yeah. And that actually made me think about something that helped me when I was first really digging into my self-love journey, was thinking about myself, actually create a little bit of separation so I could visually see, thinking of myself or my soul as a little version of me, like the little kid version of me, getting an image of myself as a very innocent, sweet child, and separating that and looking at her and saying, would I say all of those things that I've been saying to myself? Would I say that to her? Would I beat this little girl down in that way? And trying to visually see myself hugging that little girl, loving her, sending her love, and seeing her as just this little being that needs healing. And when we can almost take ourselves out of it for a moment and give love to something, because sometimes that feels like it's the only way to actually feel it, is if we're giving it to something else. If we can give it to our little self, start to create that connection and relationship as well.
Yes, because the basis of this show is all about turning pain into power and trauma into triumph. And in my first episode, I explained how I was abused as a child. And as you get older, if someone doesn't create a space for you to love yourself, and you're always loving everybody else, you grow up with a sense of, am I worthy for this? I mean, some amazing opportunities can come your way, but until you're able to truly love yourself and say, you know what, I am worthy of this. This is my special gift. God is centering me. God is bringing this to me. And I think self-love is so important, because sometimes you can't even recognize what is in front of you if you don't have that self-love. Because I almost want to frame it in, you're almost in a mentality of service instead of serving yourself. You could be in that mentality your whole life from that space. You can't create these passion projects. You can't create and believe in the impossible if you're always in that mindset. So you talked about the 3 pillars are self-love, mindset, and co-creating. Can you talk a little bit about mindset and why that's so important to self-love?
Yes. So I do cover self-love first because I want people to start understanding how much they're actually lacking that self-love. Because no matter what we put in our minds, if we don't internally really believe it, then it doesn't matter because it's not going to do anything. It's like saying an affirmation over and over again with no feeling or energy underneath that. So I cover the love first, and then we get to the mindset. And the mindset is so important as well, even though, the feelings have to be there. Everything about our experience is created by the projection that we're having. So if our internal loop is a negative one, or if it's something that makes us feel not great, and it's stuff it's autopilot stuff, we're not controlling what's going on there, then what we're doing is we're creating a really negative projection, which means we're creating a really negative experience because our projections are actually what we experience as we go through life. So it's really important that we start taking back that control of the loop that we have playing. This is where the affirmations are really important. This is where it's really important to start speaking into existence the things that you want and being aware of everything that you're consuming. And I mean everything you're consuming cerebrally. So not necessarily food, not necessarily water, although, we want to track those things too. But what are you taking into your environment? Because that is what creates the programming going on that we're not even aware of. So we need to start tuning into what are we taking in, what loops, like I said, are going on, and just start taking control because it really does create the life that we have.
Yes. So I want you to talk about how important it is to get away from negative environments, negative people, because I love what you said about consuming. Consumption is not just about eating or putting something in your body. It's about that energy that you're putting into your spirit and your soul. So can you talk about how toxic are negative environments or negative loops and negative people? And how imperative is it to just live your life totally away from these familiar environments, even though we might have orchestrated our life around this particular set of people, set of community? How important is it to not survive in negative?
Oh my gosh. This is probably the hardest part of personal development. And this is the hardest part of change, because what it's forcing us to do is create like a lot of action steps and to actually physically move through the resistance. So it's very painful. We often lose a lot of people in our life that we didn't expect to lose or that we don't want to lose. It requires sometimes a physical move, leaving a relationship. It requires the hard stuff because that's just what's required to change. And when you start changing your internal self, you start seeing the world differently. And when you start seeing the world differently, the world around you, if it's not serving you, if it's a bit toxic, it starts to feel really dense. And that's where a lot of time the disconnect happens, is we start to feel all this potential. We start to feel this momentum building up, but it just starts to swirl around and feels really stuck because we're not releasing it. We don't know what to do with it. This is where the overwhelm happens. This is where, the resistance comes in and it's really heavy. So it's the most important thing though to do, because it will free you. Once you're on the other side of it, you will start to live freer. You will start to feel more aligned, and all the things that you desire will start coming in because you've created the energy like portal opener for it to come into your life. Because staying in those tough environments is creating blockages. when things are just like, everything just feels like it's not working out and it's frustrating and you feel like you're beating your head against a wall, it's because you literally have a blockage around you because you're not freeing yourself. So it's the number one thing to do, but it is so difficult. And I'll tell you, when I started on this journey, I always joke around how becoming an entrepreneur is the most expedited personal development process you could go through. But I say that so seriously because when I personally started, I changed everything in my life. I changed my environment by moving. I moved from Seattle to Austin. I had previously, a few months before that, left a relationship that it was good, but not great. I left a career that was, 6 figures, but it just wasn't serving me. I started a business that felt aligned, even though I didn't know what I was doing yet. I released friends that really never had my back in the first place. I learned, but I had to let it go. And what that ended up doing, although it was really hard in the moment, and it took me months of just crying and releasing and telling myself I'm not a bad person. I just wanted more for myself. So I was loving myself through it. I had to be okay with that. What ended up happening was, by releasing that, I then opened up space for goodness to come in. But the reason it's so hard to trust that the goodness is going to come in is because everything has a gestation period that's required. Think about it. It'd be really weird if we got pregnant, for example, and then the next day had the baby. It's like nobody's ready for the baby the next day. You need to give it time to form, to become perfect, to become ready to come into this world. And you need to have the time to become mentally ready and the person you want to be for that child to come in. So, that gestation period is so crucial. And that gestation period is the same with anything else, but it's the hardest part because we don't actually have a time period for when the goodness is going to show up. So that's where the faith is required. Yeah. So it requires an up-leveled version of yourself to be okay with that. And sometimes it's really hard because we're not quite there yet.
Yes. Oh my gosh, you are really speaking to my soul, because I can remember writing a book about 4 years ago, releasing it. I wrote it probably 6 years ago, but releasing it, and I expected all these pieces to just fall into place, and they didn't. And God spoke to me, and he was like, there is a development period. You have all these ideas you're putting this together, and you're just out the gate like a horse. But he let me know. I prayed and I said, Lord, anything that's not for me, take it away from me. Close the door. I don't want to go in the door. And I'm telling you, I have literally been in tears because of those hard life lessons. But those life lessons were my development, as you say, my gestational period. You can't just get pregnant with the idea and you're off to the races. There's a development and there's an authenticity more than development to me, because when you come out with whatever your passions are, you want to be authentic. That's who you are. You have the life design coaching program. That's authentic to Jesi Carroll. You see? So God is going to give you exactly what you want, but there is a development stage and you're always growing. And I'm quite sure you put your program together, but you can also see parts of it still developing. So that's just awesome. That just really spoke to my soul. And people need to know, just because you're starting from zero, you still have something to give to this world.
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that too. And because I really believe the authenticity part of that journey is so crucial. It's realizing that everybody's gestation period looks different. Even if you're trying to accomplish something very similar, some people are supposed to receive the outcome of it sooner than others, and some it's going to be perfect a couple years from that, or longer or sooner. It doesn't matter. It's just about knowing that you want it so badly and you believe it so strongly, no matter what anybody else says, that it's going to happen. And then it so will. And I think about my own journey with my business. It's just been this constant unraveling. I started purely just doing interior design. And through my consultations, having them go longer and really connecting with people, you start to build relationships. And they were sharing with me really a lot of things that were on their heart, which was, they're really fear-based in a lot of their decision making. They're not trusting themselves, coming back to that self-love and self-worth piece. They don't even know if they deserve to have a space that they love. So it was becoming a deeper conversation. And I thought, well, I own a business. I can make it whatever I want. So it was this huge freedom piece, but also, okay, well, what do I do? And I realized, well, I'm a certified life coach. I've been wanting to create a program. I'm going to do something with that. But I created a life coaching program and I was like, I am freaking in love with this. But now I've got 2 businesses. What do I do? And I started freaking out instead of enjoying the process for a bit. But when I relaxed and said, I surrendered. I said, universe, I don't know, God, anything. I was like, I don't know what this should be. How can I serve? I turned it into service. I was like, my goal here is to empower and to serve. Can I serve? And it was like all these downloads started coming in, because the moment I took myself out of it and I focused on who I wanted to serve and how I wanted to serve, and that was the only pieces I knew, it all started to come to me. And it was like, wait, now I know design can be a tool, a mechanism, a modality for healing. And I can incorporate it in my beautiful program, and so I just started trusting. And it's still, in the pivot phase, it's still becoming really it's morphing into what it's supposed to be, but I'm just trusting that it's becoming what it's supposed to be in its own time. And that's allowing it to be really fun. I'm enjoying the process, but it's been a process to get to this point where I can sit here and tell you the pivot is fun. Because for a very long time, that was not the case in any pivots that I've experienced. I was always rushing through it, not enjoying it, forcing a certain outcome, which if I would have just let it breathe, it would have become better than what I would have ever planned. So
yes,
it's a journey.
And I think when you get to the point that money doesn't move you, that's where your authenticity lies. Because when you want to create something, and you say, oh, I have to make this amount of money. Oh, I think those are fear-based decisions. But I think when you really want to create something for the greater cause, service, put something together that's authentic to you, that's where the sweet spot is. And you were talking about pivoting is fun. And I think it's fun because pivoting and designing your authentic brand is so soul serving. It's like, okay, this is, at first when I was designing things for my new business, which is this business, I was so scared because I'm like, oh, nobody knows about this. What is it? And then I started getting excited when I started talking to like-minded people, because they led me to believe it's authentic. It's you. It's your baby. So that is, authenticity is so exciting. And you could not get there without self-love, because you would be running, trying to figure out, okay, who's doing this? Who's doing this? Who's doing this? Who's doing this? And those are fear-based decisions. So it's so important, the work that you're doing, especially around self-love. So can you tell us about your third pillar, co-creating?
Ooh, yes. So co-creating is really about understanding that we create our life. We create experience. It's about taking rational responsibility for our lives. So removing, honestly, a lot of victim mentality, feeling sorry for ourselves and our situations, feeling like life is happening to us versus for us. It's getting out of those mindsets and taking our power back. And so in my process and my methodology, I start with the self-love. Then I move to the mindset, and then I move to the co-creation, because I really believe that we want to start with the self. Once we deeply understand the self and know who we are, we observe how we're moving about the world, and then make some changes to that. Then it's about bringing that new knowing of who we are, and understanding also this new lens of how we see the world, and then understanding how we can create the reality that we desire in the reality that we're living in. So taking all of the blocks aside, moving the blocks that are in our way, and saying there doesn't need to be any rational reasoning to the life we want. We can create it however we want, and showing people how to take the new knowledge of the self that they've just gained in the unraveling with me to then seamlessly bring that into the world that they're living in. So it's a lot of kind of getting to neutral, a lot of emotional intelligence work, boundaries, not allowing the world to sway you in one way or the other, but really standing strong and firm in your decisions and what you know to be true for the self, and then making all of your decisions from that place. So that's primarily what that one's about. But I think it ends up being one of the most rewarding because it's taking all the knowledge that we're learning and moving it into action steps. I'm really about practical action steps. It's like, okay, we'll have this knowledge. What do we do with it? It's like, that doesn't create empowerment. That creates stuckness and fear. It creates more fear. The more knowledge, the more paralysis by analysis we do. So I really help people shift from the knowledge gathering to actually doing. So showing people how they can take what they've learned and bring it into the world. So that's what that one's about.
I love that. And there's a verse in the Bible that I love, something that you just touched on, gathering all the knowledge, but not doing anything with it. And the verse is, hope deferred makes the heart sick. So
wow.
We can't be hoping on something all of our lives, but if we stay stuck at hope, it's going to make us sick. It's going to make our soul sick, our body sick. It's going to literally, a person can die with their dreams inside of them.
Yeah.
You keep gathering this information, but you're not doing anything with it because you're stuck in a state of fear of society expectations, of following the herd, instead of saying, you know what? I am worthy. I do love myself. So therefore, what I have is valuable for the world. And I just absolutely love that. So it's co-creating from a space of, okay, so now I've let all the walls come down. So now my energy field can connect with what God has for me. So now the opportunities start to pour in gradually because I'm standing in this energy field that is so light and so abundant. And I felt this when I've made small moves towards my authenticity, when I've let these walls kind of come down. Some shocking things happen when you let the walls come down. So is that a part of co-creating that you have observed?
Oh yeah, you nailed it. That's such a big part of it, if not it, because when we get to that point, when we start to understand that we can create our lives, we start to have extreme trust. Faith becomes our DNA. All of a sudden, the walls, suddenly, we don't really see them anymore because all of a sudden everything becomes possible to us. We suddenly become limitless. And I actually was thinking about something as you were speaking that resonated with me. It's the idea that an inch of action far outseeds a mile of intention. It's about moving forward one step at a time and trusting that one step, even if it feels mini. It's moving towards something because you believe that you are deserving of it and you are worthy of having it, and you don't care what anybody says because you love you.
Yes, I absolutely love that. And I'm going to quote you on this. Faith becomes your DNA. I was interviewing earlier this week with an amazing guest such as yourself, and it brought tears to my eyes. She said, the more my faith grew, the more my business grew. She was so shattered with fear and just stuck with fear. She still moved on and quit her job. And even though she was invested in this job for a long time, she knew she wanted to start her own business. And she said, the more my faith grew, the more my business grew. And
that just gave me chills.
It gave me chills and brought tears in my eyes. I'm like, that is so true, because that's from our soul. And we have faith. Oh my gosh. And you brought it together by saying faith becomes our DNA. Faith is just, can you talk a little bit about faith with this journey?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm so honored to answer a question like that, because that's all we need. Put business strategies aside, put it, all the things aside, all the tactics, the social media, whatever. The only thing we need is faith. And I think because it's just this deep knowing. Faith is actually the most representative form of the self-love that we have, because it's this deep knowing, like I said, that we are worthy of having it, because we just trust that something has our back. We don't have to worry about anything. And I think that's a really key thing to keep in mind for, solopreneurs out there and anybody building their dreams that feel so much bigger internally than they're actually looking right now on the outside world, is knowing that you're not alone in your creation. You can ask for help at any point because you have something that is there, something that's bigger than all of us, that is there and loves you and cares about you and supporting your journey. You wouldn't have the ideas that you have if you weren't able to create them. They were gifted to you for a reason. A book that actually changed my life is called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And she talks about the birthing of ideas and how they're gifts and how they're meant for us because they're coming to us. And we need to value it because they will, pass eventually to another person and get created. So it's important to see it as a gift and to know that that's coming from a higher source. It's coming from something to you. And so you're not alone. So I could go on and on about faith, but it means something different for everybody. But at the end of the day, I think it really comes down to this ultimate knowing that you are not alone. You are loved, you are taken care of. And when you rest yourself in that is the surrender. That's the release, that you have to know all the answers, because you don't and you can't. So that's what's helped me immensely. I kind of did hit a surrender moment in my business. I knew that my mission was large, but I was like, I'm just one person. How do I do this? How do I empower as many people as possible? And it's like, well, that's my mission. I know it's going to happen. I just have to release the how and know that it's got my back. And that is allowing me to feel like I'm moving towards something, even if the day-to-day feels like, what am I doing this for? Is this anything? Am I going to, make it? All these things. It shuts out that noise.
Yes. And I think another thing surrender has done for me personally is it keeps me humble and dependent on God. I know some people might say universe, source, higher power. We interpret God to be different things. But one thing I want to say is we can't be separate in this. There is a higher power helping us to do what we need to do in the world. We are not God ourselves. We are dependent. So when it keeps me humble, knowing that I have to depend on God, my faith, to get me to the next level. Because if I call my friend and I say, hey, can you hook me up with this person or that person, that might happen and it might not happen. But when we really depend on God, magic happens. Like the book says, the big magic. The big thing happens when we surrender and we just go into a place of, okay, I surrender. I don't know how this is going to happen. I feel kind of like uneasy about it, but I still have a knowing in me that this is what I'm supposed to be doing in life. Those doors seem to somehow open, the ones that we couldn't open ourselves. So,
I love that. And I think for me, for a very long time, I had a hard time with the idea of surrender because I didn't want to give up that control, because I wanted to determine my outcome. I wanted to decide what this was going to be, And I think the coolest part is when you actually decide, because that's a decision. And when you decide to surrender, the outcome becomes 10 times, if not 100 times better than you would have ever imagined it, because you couldn't have even thought of how the pieces would have come together at all. Because when it comes together, it's like, holy crap, I would have never done that, So it ends up being this big blessing. So it's in your benefit to surrender and just say, all right, I've got somebody here that's going to help me. I have the ideas. You got the rest.
Yes. And for me to stay so connected to your soul, people don't realize I don't think I realized it until recently, over the last maybe 3 years, that our soul is saying something, and we really have to let all the negativity out around us. We really have to go on these breaks of social media, just stomping out everything and really listen to what is your soul saying, because sometimes you could be going to a job that you absolutely hate. I mean, you could go to it for 40 years, you could go for 20 years and you hate it. That's not what your soul is saying. You're creative. There's something that needs to be birthed that you can serve the world with, but we're not listening to our soul. We're in automatic. Yeah. So listening to my soul and having faith in the unknown and surrender, all those are such special ingredients to getting where we need to be in this world. The big magic. I love that. Yeah. So, Jesi, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything that you want to tell our listeners about self-love, having a relationship with yourself?
Ooh, I guess if I could leave with one piece of advice, is just to work on knowing you are so loved. You're loved. You are seen. You have value. What you say has value. What you do has value. You're a good person. Just knowing that and putting that on repeat, starting there, just starting to tell yourself, I am loved, in all caps. I am loved. And when you start to do that, when you start to say it to yourself, and it gets more comfortable, and you can look at yourself in the mirror and you can say, I am loved, by looking at yourself literally in your eyes in the mirror, you start to really build that connection deeper. And that starts the domino to everything else. So just start with that message internally, and you'll just feel better.
Because that message has really gotten you to amazing places. So you moved from Seattle to Austin, and you did your 6-figure job to become an entrepreneur and what you really felt passionate about. So that is a powerful affirmation. So thank you so much for joining me. And now it's time for something to sip on. I'm going to ask you 3 powerful questions.
Okay.
To answer them especially. And this is the Mom Stuff Coffee Shop. So the first question I want to ask you is, what brings you joy?
Ooh, these questions I'm always like, oh, rapid fire. What brings me joy lately has been, I call them my old lady walks. I go on a walk around the neighborhood in the sun almost every day now that I have sunshine. So that brings me joy, listening to a podcast or something while I'm on my, old lady walk in the neighborhood.
And the next question is, what are you working on in your life right now?
Ooh, I am working on my rituals. I am working on really creating boundaries around my rituals, owning my morning, owning my evening, and pausing in the day. So I do a lot of breathing or mini meditation exercises in the day to help me stay in control. So just really getting very strict on that with myself in a good way.
Oh, that's beautiful. That is a great, great thing to be working on. And the last question I want to ask you is, what has been your greatest life lesson?
So far, it's trust the process. Trust the process. Man, and when you forget the lesson, it comes back.
It's the boomerang.
Yeah.
Yes, and that keeps us humble. The humility I was talking about earlier, if you don't trust the process. Well, thank you so much, Jesi, for joining us. So how can our guests follow you and get in touch with you or eventually work with you?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. It's been a beautiful conversation. People can find me. My website is jesicarrolldesign.com. And then on all the socials, it's just Jesi Carroll.
Thank you for joining us. And friends, remember, thank you for joining us today inside the Mom Stuff Coffee Shop, where we're turning your pain into power and trauma into triumph. And remember, you can always celebrate wins and get back up again inside the Mom Stuff Coffee Shop. Please share, rate, and subscribe this podcast anywhere you find this podcast. And don't hesitate to go look up our guest, Jesi Carroll, in our show notes wherever this podcast is available. Thank you.
So friends, I hope today's episode was food for your soul and fuel for your life. You can go to anywhere you're listening to this podcast and find out more on our guests. Please rate, share, subscribe to this podcast on any platform. I am your host, KK Smith, and remember, you can always celebrate wins and get back up again inside the Mom Stuff Coffee Shop.